So, most of you know who this fellow is, Jeff Hengesbaugh. Lives over at Glorietta, has a lifetime of being a historian, trying to bring us good things, proper things. He's most famous for the magnificent thing that he and two other fellows did in the 70s, riding from Mexico to Canada, cross country. Epic. And we've touched base with him off and on over the years to see what Jeff's doing. And he's had this exciting project with Beckworth rifle. And he's here today to show you what he's found. And we're going to be making a video of this. This fine lady's doing this, so hopefully in the future this will be available to anyone who wants it for research.
Well, thank you, Bill. Very, very kind. Thanks for all showing up. There is so much information that I'm going to try to do a 50-minute period. But at any time you feel that you need to ask a question, please ask a question. We have the technical aspects of this gun, which will put us most to sleep. We have the discovery of who made the guns that won't put you to sleep, and we have the actual mystery of a third of the Hawken rifles are gone from history, and the fact that the existing Hawkens are all in percussion and are all stamped, you know, is huge, and that's part of the secret of the mystery, part of the answer to the conundrum. But before we go to that, I got to salute our own self, and none of this stuff would be here if a number of things hadn't happened in our society, and I just happened to be riding a canoe right through the middle of it. So, few of you may realize that they sold $1 billion worth of Davy Crockett hats.
And that's when $1 was worth some money.
You damn right. I'm not talking about $1 billion. Why? Because Davy said, if you know you're right, you go ahead. And it addressed, after a big World War and everything else that went along with it, poverty and so forth, it addressed to each and every one of us the concept of the realization of what they call the hero's journey, where you leave the familiar, no matter what that is. Me on horseback to Canada, or you creating a house out of nothing and digging your own well, and living in that unfamiliar and coming out on the other side. That's what we do. That's what makes us worth living. Those doggone boomers, that was the 50s. Oh, by the way, Davy Crockett was #1 song in the nation, Born on a Mountaintop, for 3 weeks. Think about that. Think about pulling off Davy Crockett right now as #1 in the nation for 3 weeks. So that you can get the feeling of what the hell's going on here. So the same boomers, the Davy Crockett people, literally rediscovered the West. We were raised, at least I was, on decades of a surrogate storyteller TV that my dad was too busy doing what he never took any of that stuff. But I sat in front of that TV and I saw these people come and go and do their things and be on horseback and be honest, and they were the true Johnny Appleseeds of adventure for me. By the 1960s, the baby boomers literally recreated the West, literally through finding artifacts, literature, artwork. When I was in Scottsdale, it just never stopped. I was on constant call for riding any horse, doing anything, wearing my buckskins for photographs. In the process of the literature, Charlie Hansen comes up with a book called The Plains Rifle, and in that was a chapter on the Hawken. And it wasn't all that good, and it wasn't certainly all that accurate. But it started to capture the imagination of a group of people. Davy died at the Alamo. Now we're talking about a group of adventurers that are going into the unknown. And in their hand was an incredible weapon that made everything possible. It was called the Hawken rifle. Soon thereafter, it started rolling. A guy by the name of John Beard said, now people wanted Hawken rifles. People were leaving their little shooting groups and starting to go out to rendezvous. But everyone had to have the Hawken. So John Beard comes up in that period of time and he writes the Hawken rifle, the Mountain Man's Choice, and it went through 7 editions. And his idea was to, and the only person that ever even attempted to describe the traits and characteristics of a Hawken gun, but he was doing it so that you could build an accurate copy, and so forth and so on. So he had about 6 or 7 rifles in his book, and he went over it meticulously from butt plate to the interior of the gun. Charlie and Jim Hansen got irritated at that. He said, by that time Hawken, who had been relatively ineffective as far as prices are relatively cheap, were starting to rise in price. And Charlie and Jim Hansen wrote a book called the Hawken rifle, its place in history. And he was very biased toward the concept that hardly anything was going on with the Hawken rifle during the fur trade. In fact, Jim even made a supposition that besides some circumstantial evidence, which I'll go into it a little bit later, there's no real evidence that the Hawken was even in the 1820s, and that it wouldn't start until the 1830s, and then it would be a prototype after prototype and be ready to go by the 1840s. And so all this is beginning to well up and move up, but the Hawkenmania had started. And I would sit on my trade blanket for decades and watch these Hawkens, men and women taking their Hawken to the firing line and seeing that Hawken silhouette. Back and forth, and it imprinted in my mind. And eventually what happened, 30 years later, I was at a gun show in Tulsa, Oklahoma, some 5,000 tables. That's roughly 11 and a half miles of to cover. And there's that golden moment where everyone's setting up and tables and are squealing and cars are coming in and things are being laid down and so forth and so on. And I'm walking down and I saw, holy shit, there's a Hawken. And it was about 50 yards away. And there's 3 rows of tables over and downrange. I said, that's a Hawken. No one brings a Hawken to sell it. And so I buy a silhouette. So I ran up on it. Just as I got to it, 2 guys got on it and they were doing this. And so I thought, oh man. And they set the damn thing down. And it was this rifle. And I looked at it, well, there's no stamp, which was a mortal sin. It didn't have a scroll guard. But I'd been raised that a mountain gunner, that a big game rifle had a big barrel, big caliber, all iron mounted, extended tang. And I bought it. Went ahead and bought it. So on the way home, I live in downtown Glorietta. We have a museum, and they're owned by Jim Gordon. And Jim is a pragmatist. Everything in his museum, for the most part, are named. He wants names on tomahawks, knives, and guns, or stamps, or something of that nature, so that you can learn from experience. Yeah.
What year did you find that?
Okay, so it's 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when I found it. So I'm on the way home, and I can't wait to get to his museum, because I question myself, why, I saw a Hawken. What happened to my Hawken? I was going mental on it. And I got back to Gordon's place, and he has 10 Hawkens sitting in a row. And I took the middle one out, put my Hawken up, put a blanket on, and said, Jim, can you determine what's not a Hawken up there? Well, I can't. What are you doing? And I brought down the Beckworth. And by the way, Beckworth was not part of this factor at all. At this time, I had no concept. I'm still going raw. So Jim turns to me and said, why would you ever try to work on a rifle without a name on it? And I go, oh man, that's rough. And he was serious. He was really frustrated with me, because I was saying, why can't that be a Hawken? Why can't that be a Hawken? And so the next thing I did was say, okay, well, I'd seen the Hawken silhouette decades ago, and maybe my memory's wrong, and even though these fit, so I made a silhouette out of this butt, took it to every Hawken I could find for the next year, and all fit, plus or minus. And there's a reason why, a very important reason why. So I said, well, where do I go to for facts? Where do I go to for an understanding? And then I began to understand through a lot of research that unlike the Winchester and the Colt and the Sharps, there's no patents, there's no drawings, there's no anything that pertains to the beginning of this rifle whatsoever. If there was, it's been long since lost. Then I realized with a frightful mind that the only information left on Earth about these Hawken rifles are in the remaining Hawkens in very small collections all over the world. And then I said, well, how in the hell am I ever going to get to anybody's collection? And even more so, what do I do to extract the information from those guns? So Gordon turned out to, I just did it so I wouldn't irritate him. I did it on off hours, and he'd come once a day, and then after I'd fill in and work on all his guns, and went back and forth, and I spent roughly 3 years. My degree is not in gunsmithing, it's not in making guns, it's not collecting Hawkens, it's not even in Hawken history. I'm a zoologist with a passion for the West. Okay, but the only thing I knew what to do is what they call the scientific method. Descartes, a long time ago, he took a rock and he said, "It feels like a rock, it looks like a rock, it's probably damn rock." And if a rock, why can't I do a rifle? So I started, and I went from the back of this thing to the front of this thing, and Jim had 27 Hawkens, about 16 were heavies that had gone west, or a big caliber design for the West. I spent roughly 3 years, and eventually discovered, no matter what I discovered, it wasn't going to be enough. I got in a big row with Jim Hansen, who actually insulted, and I didn't understand that all these research centers, I thought they'd be happy. And what I was trying to do, instead of offering you an opinion, I was going to offer you a provable observation this afternoon and prove it again tomorrow morning in some deductive reasoning, and if you had something better, then we could learn and try to figure out. Well, in the process, I found out that there's roughly 1/3 of the Hawken production missing, gone, 0. The entire collection. I'm saying the Hawken started in the 1820s and early 1820s. In fact, I'd say even more that it was probably ready to go by 1820, and because we have some circumstantial evidence that 36 rifles are at the bottom of the Missouri that turned over with the Enterprise and went down. We know that supposedly Sam Hawken made a rifle and there's a ton of other evidence that really allows you to know that the Hawken was being produced in the 1820s. That being said, Jim Hansen said, absolutely, we can't prove it. So every time he threw up circumstantial evidence, you can go two ways. Yeah, it either is or isn't. And if you put it is, then the 1820s was a really busy time in St. Louis. If it isn't, then you can't. There's so many random things that happened in the 1820s that implied that there was, Hawken sales going on. But things became conclusive when I finally ran into information that a guy by the name of Etienne Provost. He was spotted with a Hawken probably as early as 1827. Two guys saw him and said, "I want 2 Hawkens just like this one." So there's 3 Hawkens. Then in 29, the Provost either buys 2 or 5 Hawkens. Now we got 8, let's say 5, we'll go that way. Because he spent $50 and got 2 Hawkens, and a week later spent $75 and got probably 3 more. But Hansen would say, we don't know if he got pots or pans or, okay. So then in 34, he buys 6 more Hawkens, steel mounted for the rendezvous. So you got 6, so we got the initial 3. We got a guy controlling, one person controlling about 12 Hawkens. One person. So, and that was in the late 20s. So we actually have now established that the Hawken was indeed made in the 1820s. Okay, so we got the question that we're missing 1/3 of the Hawkens that were ever produced. And these Hawkens were the ones that really went west with the mountain men and the drovers on the Santa Fe Trail. And because all the other guns in collections today are percussion, that means they're post 1830s. And even though there's a lot of activities, it probably wasn't the same as the Mountain Man and the most exciting pair. So what happened to them? Well, where did these guns go? Well, the first thing is that they never were, it's just a myth, like Hansen proposed. The second thing was it was a limited production, got eaten up by forest fires, dropped in rivers, falling off cliffs, made into gun barrel scrapers by the Blackfoot, who the hell knows? Not a one of them exists. So the third idea was that Hawken, because of the competition, stamped their later versions, let's say 1840, with stamps because of the competition. Okay, so then we hit the 50s, then we hit the Civil War, then we hit the 80s, and there's thousands of muzzleloaders and rifles roaming the country. And anybody who would have remembered the Hawken or remembered anything unique about it was long since gone. And rightfully so, to be able to determine if that's a particular style of wood and so on. And so by the Hawkamania time, when Hawken started to really get popular and so forth, it's easy to identify something with a name on it. And I think the rifles that got selected for were the ones that had stamps on them, and the ones that didn't have any stamps on them were not selected for. And that's pretty much my supposition at this time. I can't think of any better. When I did all my studies on this rifle, and that's, like I said, parts and pieces, and I have all the material up here, traits and characteristics change. We're going to know that the Hawken became shorter. They started using cast parts. They started using cast barrels. Blah blah blah. But there are some foundational traits that never changed. And for the Hawken rifle, it was the recognizable stock, the Hawken profile, which I could see at 40 yards. Obviously, I jumped on this gun at 40 yards. And the ingredients of this barrel, which are spectacular, and for those who don't know it. Now remember, I'm working off of a very small sample. But John Beard came into play, and there was a friend of his that lived in the 1920s and 30s that examined many Hawken barrels, and they all came up with the same conclusion. The attributes of this barrel begins with the fact that it's thick where it needs to be at the breech and tapers down to where it's not so heavy. Usually the early generations are all hand forged barrels. There's no question about it. They use a very unique system. They chamfer. You may have a better name. They funnel the muzzle of the gun so you can get the ball below the horizon. Not very much, but you can get your damn stick below the horizon so you're not spinning off. And then you push it through a choke 7 to 8 inches. And then ever so lightly, she opens up toward the breech. So it allows you to sit the ball. So start the ball, sit the ball. Now when that gun goes off, that ball starts forward with no opposition. Then it slowly climbs into a 1 in 48 twist. And she's moving fast now. She's heading for the choke. Now the gases acts like a venturi. So they're building up behind that damn ball. And as it hits that choke, boom, it goes through, straightens itself, leaves the muzzle without touching. It doesn't get any deflection off the muzzle whatsoever. So it's unique for a number of reasons. You can put almost any handful of powder in here, and it will shoot without being finicky. Handful, barrel full, whatever the case may be. It will allow the ball to go out. The soft iron initially knocked down any chatter in the barrel. That was the initial plan of the people who put this together. It was combined with a set of sights, buckhorn back sights, and I kind of explained the front sight with the silver over copper. So it had 9 attributes. None of them that I don't think Hawken invented, but the combination of 9. You may find some on some rifle, but not all on this rifle. Beckworth rifle has every one of those attributes. And in one of Beard's best men there said that all the rifles he examined, Hawken rifles, had the same attributes. And then Beard examines 2 rifles, same way, 1 and 48 twist, choked down, opened up, so forth and so on. So between the stock and this, so this began with the first rifle and would end, if we did Carson's rifle, you'd find the same thing. So this is what I try to bring forth and try to prove. In the end, it didn't matter, no one cared. I just recently told somebody I had a sit down with Gordon and Jim Hansen. I said, you both are sitting on top of research. I said, I'm a zoologist. And I said, I had to sit here and work on this thing for years and years and without any intellectual room or opportunity to work on these damn guns. And I said, why wouldn't you know? And then okay. So anyhow, I'm still frustrated about it. But and I don't know why to this day why they wouldn't give me the running room on this particular gun. So then I get discouraged and I sell the gun. You betcha. And the guy happened to be a historian at that time, happened to have some money. And I said, listen, there's something mythical. I had never taken the barrel off because of this rawhide piece. I didn't know how far the tang went down, and I wanted to preserve everything. I did try to shoot it with, took it down to a vet, and the x-ray was so damn strong, you could see 2 mules and a raccoon on the other side of the x-ray, you know. And so I said, would you please x-ray this gun? I think it's mythical. So 2 months go by and I get a call from him, and the gun had been sent to a space lab in Largo, Florida. And everything was intact, and they put it on his back. And this space lab goes after metal that's going to outer space, looking for voids or flaws or fissures or cracks. And it's radiated, so it goes down. Bam! On the bottom of the barrel, J.P. Beckworth. Which is insane. Okay, so the guy that bought the gun, he said, who's J.P. Beckworth? And I said, I'd written a screenplay about Jim Beckworth, and I had years before that. So he and I were real familiar with ourselves in the name. So he sent it. He got it back, and I said, listen, here's the deal. You got to be very careful with this. I said, make the slightest incision, take the barrel off, and then use toothpaste. And the sucker rubbed on that thing for 6 hours with toothpaste. It was so under elk blood and dirt and gunpowder that if I'd ever pulled that barrel while I had it, I would never have pushed the issue of x-raying the thing. So anyhow, so I bought it back. My butt's still blistered from the negotiations there. And so what I did was contact the most, well, as far as I could understand, her name's Wendy Carlson. She just did a $1 million handle on John Wesley Hardin's pistol. But her legal stuff's about this high and this high. And so I said, Wendy, could a young man, Jim went into the Rocky Mountains with Ashley in 1824. I said, could a young man write his name in steel? Now when you do what Jim did, what you do first, it's on a flat. So you really got to be careful with your name. And then you do it in pencil, very carefully. And then you scribe it very carefully. What Jim did, after he got done putting his name on there, he took a lead ball and filled it.
Okay.
And that's why that some bitch popped so hard you could hear it in Houston when the x-ray hit it. So Wendy, I said, Wendy, could a young man, 24 years of age, sign his name on a piece of metal be compared to an old man putting his last will and testament when he was in his 60s? She said, yeah, there's only one thing that can happen. Signature's a signature. And she was only a day and a half when she called back. She said, not only is it Jim Beckworth's signature, but it was authored by Jim Beckworth. So if I saw your signature, I could probably do it for the day, but the next day you might be a little uptight, a little hurried. But so not only was it his signature, but it was authored by Jim Beckworth, 100%. And since the barrel fits in the stock, and the stock, it's, I'm calling it Mr. Beckworth's rifle. It also happened to document all my research saying that this rifle was part of the missing stash of the first generation flintlock rifles. Now let's go into the flintlock part. For this gun to even be considered, even start this conversation, it has to have a wrought iron barrel. It has to have been flintlock. It had to be steel mounted. Just to start the story. Otherwise, you eject it. That's what traits and characteristics do. It is a very apersonal situation. If your buckle's loose, it's loose. I don't care why. Okay, so initially, the thing with provable observation is you gotta know what the hell you're looking at. Yeah, I just didn't know what I was looking at. It took me a year to figure out what I was looking at and how the components came together. You know, the Hawken owners always brag that each Hawken's a little bit different, and this and that, and so forth and so on. True, but for various reasons, but not in those reasons necessary to make the gun a champion gun from start to finish. They're not going to compromise those attributes, and that's what I finally got to. Okay, so then. The Beckworth gun's interesting. It's a 1-bolt lock, you know, and oftentimes in the cheaper flintlocks, they did that. Sometimes they supplemented a 1-bolt lock with a L-shaped device that goes into the front of the stock, so the lock goes in and it sits down and the screw tightens it down. The Hawken rifles did both. There's an article about 2 locks, 1 percussion, and 1 flintlock. It's the only one that exists at the Smithsonian, have L-shaped device. But the important thing is the Rabbit, R-A-B-B-I-T, which allows the flow over the stock, especially when you have a high wall, you know, off your stock. It has to have a relief to go back and forth. It's not uncommon, you know. And then what's interesting, if you look at these 2 rifles, the rifles are not happy with the percussion locks. They both have a jig in the top where as the hammer descends, it drags itself through the wood. So you got not only the Rabbit, which is the original condition of the rifle coming and going, but you have a very unhappy stock as a result of the hammer being on it. And I have images of all this. By the way, I just wanted to show, this is a 50 caliber. This would be a gun comparable to any gun in St. Louis at the time. 50 caliber, and this is a big game rifle. You can just see it's at least 20% larger, and it's a time and a half as much in weight. It's just a big gun. Think about going to Cape Town and having a 500 Jeffrey. I grew up with a 30-06 and a 270 could take any North American game. Maybe moose charging in, and maybe a wolf or a grizzly. But the first Cape Buffalo had made a 30-06 into a bracelet over in Africa. This is designed for, this is a subspecies of the American rifle tradition up to 1800. And, okay, so now I'll leave a little bit. If any particular questions, and I'll get into who probably made this gun.
Is that a 50 caliber or that?
Yeah, 50 caliber. Yeah, but you can't do too much more about it. It's like sneezing powder in there. But that's all the guns that were running for $10 when this is running for $25 in St. Louis. All these other guns weren't even close. And when that Keelboat went belly up with 37 rifles, Ashley asked for $25 a piece for 35 guns. And Hansen would call that circumstantial. You know, so it's fine. I'm not, you know, all's fair in love and war. But at any rate, these there's a lot more. My way of feeling. Let me go into the makers and I can get into more stuff. Any other questions, particularly on the rifle? And thank you for staying alive. Yeah.
Beckworth is 50 caliber too?
No, Beckworth is a whopping big old .56. It's 58 at the nose, so you get the ball down it to the choke, and then it's a true caliber .56. Yeah.
So all the Hawkens that you've looked at, they're all combed at the muzzle?
No, no, not at all. I mean, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so what I did, Beard did 2 rifles in his book, same thing, Code. And that friend of his did 20. And that's enough for me, given the fact, because I can go over and measure it, I've been doing so much on this thing, but I'm convinced that is the absolute foundational makeup of a Hawken barrel. With a little, but this guy, I should have his quote, it's in my book. That's all he did was clean and ream Hawken barrels in the 20s and 30s, and he described them all the same. Yeah. And look, any other questions? Okay, so here's what's going on as far as I've learned in the process of studying. So Lewis and Clark were very unenchanted with the rifles when they come back. And they purchased all the man killers they could. You know, their big 58s and everything else, again, just didn't have enough powder behind them. And my story begins with a guy who might have talked to Clark before he went on the journey across the country, and he might have talked to William Clark, after he got back from the expedition. His name was James Beckworth. James Beckworth, back up a little bit, in 1800, Eli Whitney stopped forever the golden age of firearm buildings. He's the first person to propose that a rifle could be built with unskilled labor. So Mr. Jim Beckworth and his brothers, from 1802 to 1818, when he took off to St. Louis, did nothing but go from factory to factory, putting in workstations. And when Jake Hawken came to St. Louis the same year in 1818, he was an official part-time worker for finishing stocks in one of these Eli Whitney situations. He wasn't doing gunsmith, and his dad was a pharmacist, and he's 30 years old, and I'm not judging him, but his whole life that I am aware of, he was just a decent man doing decent things. Okay, so Beckworth was also known as an inventor. He was known as a gun maker. He was also known, like Ashley and Henry and all these other people, William Clark, as real estate. Everything was popping. You could get into the gunpowder business. You could get in the lead business. Mostly real estate. If you couldn't get rich, you were something wrong with it. And so when Beckworth shows up in St. Louis in 1818, he's in a carriage. He's got slaves, and he's got wealth. And Jacob shows up, and he's got a beautiful man, put his rifle in front of a saddle, and he shows up and gets off his horse, and they go to work. That's 1818. So we know they're partners, but we're not sure who did what. I would suggest that Beckworth was the brains and the money behind it. I would say that he was possibly reaching way out, was inspired to find a gun designed specifically for the West. You know, the Winchester won the West, and the Colt made you and I equal. But and I don't know what the hell Sharps did, kill buffalo. But the Hawken was the first gun designed for the West. Okay, so anyway, we do know that in 1820, William Clark gave Beckworth, or the partnership, a huge contract, in which they built, a fairly good sized area. People were coming and going, they'd have no problem. Both of them were children of the factory system by now. They'd get 5 or 6 guys, but in this factory and for this contract, which was to fix all the guns in the area, Indian guns in the area, they could make screws, bore, barrels, work stocks, virtually anything that would have been part of a Hawken rifle. And that's 1820. So Sam would say that the drovers on the Santa Fe Trail in 1822 or 24 found the Hawken so good that nobody should go west without them. We got that keelboat incident in 22. So I'm saying pretty realistically that the rifle probably was being used in the 1820s and was ready to go by 21, somewhere in that area. It's at least arguable for that. And but this it's saddened, and it's also interesting too, when we get into how they eventually stamp their Hawkins, J&S Hawkins, or S Hawkins. Some of the people claim that Sam didn't put his S Hawken. In fact, one of the most powerful guy who has never published anything on the Hawken, but he has more information. He's out of St. Louis. He says that Sam never stamped his S Hawken until after his brother died in '49. But we don't have, if that's true, then, and they stamped from the beginning, we don't have any Lakenin, we don't have any Lakenin and Jake, we don't have any Jake. These are all these stamps that we just don't have, and there's no reason because they never put them on. Jim Gordon came to me, over the years, I've brought him to a standstill. Like I said, he's a pragmatist, and when you whip him, he doesn't say nothing. He's in an argument. But he said, I don't understand it. He said, I know that J&S Hawkins, J&S, or Sam and Jake made Hawkins for 24 years together. And then he dies, and Sam makes Hawkins for 5 years. But he said, I have 20 Sam Hawkins to every one J&S Hawken. And the reason is, the early ones weren't stamped. They could have gone to 1838 before they started stamping their guns. So anyhow, I'm just shotgunning you. I will be forever faithful, happy that you guys came, but it's been a most interesting situation. I'm writing a small book just called the Beckworth Rifle in a Case for an Early Hawken. By the way, Jim, as I mentioned before, was an incredible guy. His autobiography was written in 1854 in California by a T.D. Bonner. He was a top tier mountain man. Then he left that and went into the Crow tribe and fought until 1836 and came back home, and that's how the rifle got back to St. Louis, how it started. I don't know if that's the one he left town with or picked it up later, I do not know. But it has every characteristics, and the one in particular is not stamped, but everything else is pointing to the fact that it's absolutely a certified Hawken rifle. And what I've done up here, these are the books. It's scary when you you have to pioneer something. It's even scarier when no one cares. You know, but that's fine. You do it because that's what you want to do. You go out to the mailbox, so I'm not complaining about it. It's just that I'm frustrated about it in a sense that I got so excited about the Hawken mania and everything that went to it. Gordon wasn't out there riding horses and raising hell, and stuff. And I'm not going to knock Jim. His beautiful museum made everything possible to this degree. Questions? Give me 4 or 5 questions, and I'll let you off the hook. Yeah.
Hold those books up.
What's that?
Did you want to show us those
Well,
books?
yeah, well, the plains, that's good. The plains rifle was one of them. This is what started the Hawkamania off in that one paragraph. And it's just the concept of what the hell's a plains rifle? And why would you call it a plains rifle? I mean, is the Sharp called a plains rifle? No. It was worked on the plains. The second book was the most helpful in that it encouraged me to study the traits and characteristics, but he does not know why. Oh, a very important thing. Why it's a Hawken stock. He can describe it. He said it's wide and vertical. It's a little bit like a shotgun. Here's the secret to this stock, because it started me all off. If the stock is Hawken, then the rest of the gun should be Hawken. Okay, so there was a guy, and I highly recommend you get it, who was talking about silhouettes. And he was the president of the Kentucky Rifle Association. And Kentucky Rifle means every damn long gun made from, let's say, 1730 to 1800, the last of the golden age. Eli Whitney really did stop it. I mean, they kept on building them, but the commercial couldn't do it. Anyway, he was really confused because he'd just buy a rifle for 10 grand and somebody come by and say, oh yeah, that was from Lancaster, south side of the mountain near the water well, and made hooty-doo ha, and he couldn't figure out what the hell, how these guys had the knowledge. And he came to the conclusion that the Hawkins, or that the rifle silhouette, 1/3 of the rifle, was the most important presentation a firearm could display. made by Christian Hawken and another guy. And it's so different, and it was made only at the tail end of things, I mean, we're talking the last 3 years of the long rifle, the golden age. But it was so distinctive as a butt silhouette. And it was called the Maryland Flare. And it's 2 straight lines, basically, of the same length, with the ankle in between opened up and gives you a shallow butt plate. And it was known as the Maryland Flare, and sure as hell that's what either Jacob brought into play. I think personally, Lakekin and Jake worked for the government. They couldn't dare bring in a 10803 or anything that had anything to do with a military gun. I think they took the basic Hawken rifle and built that thing at the top. That's what I think they did. You know, but they had to really think of ballistics and parts and pieces, because it's a simple feeding tube. They could knock a buffalo down at 200 yards. Used by people that barely tie their shoes. I'm not down on that. No, but I'm saying it had to be in the end, it's real simple, but that's how it came. So the reason we've got this, and the reason I recognize this stock at 40 yards, 30 years after I roamed the mountains up there with rendezvous and stuff, is it was burned into my head. But even John Beard didn't know why. And eventually it just made sense. It's called the Maryland Flare. When you got west of the Mississippi, it became even more pertinent. Put it up against a Gemmer or a Beauvais or any other heavies that come in the 50s. It's distinctive. You know, it's got that flat, shallow, and so anyway, it's the other book. This is good because there's more. This is the one by Hansen. Hansen got me sputtering, and it was in reprisal to Beard saying that the Hawken was the mountain man's gun. Sure the hell was if you could afford it. Why would you not? And there's 37 guns in the hold, and Beckworth apparently walking out with one. And NTM Provost controlled 12 Hawkens, one guy? Mm-hmm. One guy? You know, anyhow, that's my... So there's a lot more to it, but there's not enough information. Anyhow, this is a good book. It brings out all the information you can possibly bring about anything. It does mention Lakekin, but the museum, the fur trade, nobody ever gave Lakekin. I think Lakekin was the man. And he dies in 1825. He dies 4 times wealthier than when he came into St. Louis. His design was so perfect that the Hawken brothers could take it on until the percussion age. And if you really want to study something, those 16 guns I went through, those guys, the brothers there's 20 different types of bolsters. There's 20 different combinations of the damn scroll guards attached here and bars there. And only when you get in the 1850s do you get that Kit Carson gun, which has light shining off of it. But then it's the end of the show. But they struggled to convert the flintlock into a percussion. They struggled, in my opinion. I'm only interested now till 1825 because that's when Beckworth came and went. That's where most of my energy's going, and just provable. But it's a lot more fun, and you need a lot less opinion. You just find it, and this I think will be beneficial for all of us. I don't care what guns you're going after. But there's so much more to history. And these guys bled like we did, and, you know, busted their knees like we did, and I hope that this has been a little bit beneficial. The other thing is Gordon's book, and if you look through this briefly, all the signed guns, all the stamped guns are later in the percussion period. So I don't know when they did it, I just know they did it later on. And you can also see too, the first you see Hawken, and then you see Hawken, St. Louis, all in individual stamps. And then you see a stamp here, and then it's below. And so you know they were coming on. There's a learning process. And I've only worked with 16 guns, maybe 20 with that. I'm working on with 20 guns. But pretty exciting stuff, and it's all part of our stuff, man. It just is, and you could be taking any kind of Hawken at any time. And I'm really glad you're dipping into the 19th century gun. But don't get fooled by that super Hawken business. This is about as super as you're going to get. You know, he's building a Hawken, which Ashley even called, or Sam called a super Hawken. And I'm going, what the hell? Oh, they had to carry it on a keelboat or carry it in a wagon. Well, what are you talking? Why would you want a rifle like that? But if you take all the statistics and you assume that the barrel on Sam's gun was probably made about the same way and same time, and you take the metal off the inside of the barrel and the weight of the barrel, blah, blah, blah. I have a nephew just go through all, this gun, the Super Hawken is about 6 ounces lighter than Beckworth's gun. You know, if you put it all together, so those are some just absolutely fascinating things. Any other questions? Come on now. Yeah.
Do you know what the rawhide comes from, what animal?
Female antelope, she was a Taurus.
That's where zoology comes in.
So we're searching for missing Hawkens. We've got, it's interesting, Hansen said that they thought that the early Hawkens were unable to produce more than 1,000 guns a year. So if you take 1,000 times 10, that's 10,000. And if you take that times, this weighs 12.9 pounds. But let's say you take it by 10 pounds. You're how many? 10,000 times 10. You got that many pounds of iron and wood missing from all of our sharp eyes who have been looking at these damn shows for all our life. God. Hey, we're in the right business, I'll tell you for a fact. And we're not gonna run out of horses except Joe. I don't know, he's into mules. Any other thoughts or thinkings on who, what, why, or what's fair, that ain't right? Yes, sir.
I was just curious, that you talk about the particular shape and
Yeah.
all of this kind of stuff. And I know this is outside of what you were actually
No, no,
researching.
go ahead.
But have you ever seen any guns that are definitely not Hawkins and look like they're imitating? Not necessarily trying to,
No, in Gordon's room, he has about 5 guns, he says Hawken-like.
okay.
But where you can jump around real quick and whip it around is measured. You're looking for
Yeah.
straight lines, and on top of that, this is key, how they did it. Initially, the butt plate, by the way, this is all metal work on this, and the butt plate is 2-piece, just like the original Hawkins were and so forth and so on. But that's a good question. If you come to the museum, you can look, there's 1,000 ways, but a Hawken looks like a Hawken. You know, it just does. It's not humped, it's not fat, it's not curved in the butt plate. It's obligated to the wide angle and a shallow butt plate. But then you start combining your facts. You start adding up your evidence. And if you get over 70%, if you're looking for a gun. So the question is, why would Gordon believe me? He's not gonna do 3 years of my research, and to him, it has a Hawken looking thing, and there's nothing to push it, not like a name. It's easy to identify something with a name on it. And I can't blame them, these, God, their last Hawken went for $125,000. Real mediocre 1840 Hawken. $130,000. And so, no, they're gonna wanna see the stamp. And now, when I grew up, I bet I got blown out of about 3 original Hawkens because someone buffaloed me that the H wasn't right, that this was here. There's a whole, and that's the other thing so irritating. There's these little epicenters of intelligence that can, if you don't have their approval, then it ain't going anywhere. And then there's argument, but if one guy is a gatekeeper and so forth, then I didn't know how to tell a Hawken name or a stamp, and then there's some totally fake. You can't blame them that way either.
Well, I wasn't thinking of fake guns per se as
No,
somebody
I know.
going, hey, this is a good design for the planes, let's make it. Whether it be Lyman or whoever.
Right. But things were moving along. I don't think Hawken was challenged.
Yeah,
This is the first big game, commercial big game on the market ever. And it was right there where the American trade was going this way and the Santa Fe was going that way. Right there, right now. And so then when people started jumping in, like Demick and Gimmer, it was 1850s. And they're after that big old, they weren't after a scrubby bunch of mountain men going one way and a couple of drovers. That's why Lakeinen and Jake only had limited production, and they cranked it up to 25 apiece. They had a limited market. And then they made pots and pans and did whatever the hell they did. So when Gemmer and the big boys came in, they waited for the Platte River Trail and Santa Fe, all these things to start building. And then the big gold rush. It's hard to imagine how many wagons were heading west. And so by that time, the big game aspect was all washed out. Not washed out. By 1850, the Civil War flattened it. Spencer's came out, blah, 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 and then they came through. But do not discount that Hawkenomania. I mean, we've got to be real proud of ourselves, right? That's in us right now. The adventure's within us. We're just not having to kill anybody for the weekends out, I don't think, right? Anybody? But I'm serious, and that's what Davy Crockett was all about, and about the mountain men going west. Oh, we're still going west. We're still going west. I would suggest we've got more conflict than they did. A grizzly bear would be easy compared to somebody that's in transition or awoke or something. Excuse me, I hope I didn't start. Joe, I didn't bother you, did I? Okay. Okay, one more and then we'll shut her down. I know you can't wait. Joe, what question do you have?
What question do I?
Yeah, that beautiful mind of yours, give us a question.
Oh, I'm not gonna ask him that.
Hey,
Have
listen.
you ever shot it?
Yeah. No, I haven't, and I would. Another interesting story, so when Beckworth put this back in St. Louis, I thought there was a fuzzy ball down there that he'd left it loaded, but he didn't. He took a piece of trade blanket, had blue and red stripes, and he must have put oil on it, and put her in the back of the gun, and I could almost pull the breech with my fingers and the damn bolster with my fingers.
Oh, wow.
He took care of it. And his ramrod's meticulous. His name is on the bottom, J, and then there's a plus and a minus. Yes, sir.
On that, wasn't Beckworth early on, prior to coming out with action and stuff, wasn't he a blacksmith apprentice also?
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, he kicked the shit out
So
of
that would,
his first job. It was Kasner, a big
That's
old
what I was
blacksmith, and Beckworth ends up inserting a hammer up his rear, and lost his job as a result of it. Then he went up to Fever River, but guess who was up at Fever River? Henry. And in 22 and 23, Henry is up there. I'm sure he talks like, come on down. Beckworth was amazing, man. Amazing, man.
but that could also go back on being able to scribe his name in there and have.
Yeah, he in his own, in Bonner's story, they actually, he actually says that he was taught by the Jesuits in St. Louis for 2 years before he scalped the Jesuit priest. No, I'm just kidding, I just said that. Yeah.
Those are both Hawken rifles?
No, this is the everyday, what we would, let's just call it a generic Eastern rifle. Handsome, big caliber, very small capacity to hold powder. Very weak under what these things would have to hold up to.
And did you say that they made some Hawken rifles heavier? Did I hear you say that?
They vary depending if they're longer. This one's almost 5 feet long, and this really follows on the tradition of the Eastern long gun maker. Yeah, the full stock, yes, but they varied by their weight. The breeches are pretty much the same, but you have to remember every decade something else happened, a new resource and so forth. But they kept the attributes, and again, that's.
And there is documentation of Beckworth owning a Hawken?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
I thought you had a... Okay.
No, that would be sacrilegious.
No.
I mean, there's nothing accountable in 1820s.
No.
In fact, Hansen said that probably it was a myth that there was even a gun made in 1820s.
And that's what I was gonna get you to talk about, Jeff, the conversation you and I have. Why would people be so reluctant to say, yeah, that's what you think it is?
And I answer partly by saying people that think that the Folsom Point is 12,000 years, yet they're finding them at 23,000. How easy are you gonna backpedal on that? Because the epitome of all identification is in the stamp. They just say there's too many variables. I squished out the variables, so there'd be heresy to take a gun without a stamp on it. Jim told me flat, he said, I wouldn't give you $10 for this gun. Not $10. You know, I think that's part of it. I think there's a big Hawken seminar back east. Yeah, there's a big Hawken seminar back east where all these people, but it's all, 1830s, 40s, 50s stuff, so I don't know. I'm gonna write the book, and then I'm gonna make a invitation, that if you can add to it, I don't want your opinion, but if you found something else, let's go. Let's build, let's get it going. Yes, sir.
That gun originally Flint,
Yes, sir, it was.
you said the hammer was,
Yeah,
hammer struck.
hand that back to him. That's where, when the hammer's off, you can see the rabbit on both guns.
You can tell where the hammer strikes the.
Yeah, and then that's where the original flintlock was, but when the hammer came down, it nicked the wood. Yeah. I wouldn't have this conversation if it wasn't a flintlock. I mean, I couldn't even start.
Yeah.
And so, it's just fascinating. This is on our watch, yeah.
But they have on record that Beckworth had it converted?
No, Beckworth is totally out of the picture, other than his name is on the bottom of this rifle.
Okay.
Yeah, and we know he went into the Rockies in 1824, and I'm saying this is an early Hawken. So you have a case of extreme history documented by a person of extreme history.
Okay.
That's how I said it.
Are you saying that when it's a flintlock, it nicks the wood, or is it?
Oh, no, when it's a flintlock, it's happy.
Okay.
It's happy only when the hammer comes down. The hammer's vertical, and it just nicked both the guns.
Because they've been converted.
You're talking about percussion
They
hammer.
were originally
Yeah.
Flint now.
Because Flint is the
Damn,
long,
exactly.
because it's plugging all the way over, the hammer is plugging the wood, I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I found it on this one, and I found it on that one. I'll bet you I'll find it on 20 more converted rifles in Gordon's place.
See what you get, when you were first saying it, I was listening, and I was trying to, but the picture
I
tells you
spent 3 years
everything.
trying to figure it out. Give
The
yourself.
picture tells you everything.
But it gets exciting,
I
and
can see
it's the nuances, but I get frustrated when, when Hanson said, he's supposed to be the epitome of the fur trade, and yet he just won't document it or at least explore it, so anyway. Yeah, Henry.
Jeff, are you familiar
About
with any
damn
of the-
time, where you been, man?
Well, I've been here. Been absorbing like a sponge.
Thank you.
All right, are you familiar with other rifles that are documented to Beckworth?
Do you
do you know of any? Have you seen others?
There was one in Colorado, but I never saw it, and when I went back, I went back to a big auction in Harrisburg,
Okay.
and there was a rifle documented too. But I'm gonna imagine, when he got back in St. Louis in 1836, he got a Hall carbine and he went down to fight the Seminoles. Then he come out to Santa Fe, and he probably got away from this thing as soon as possible. Maybe. I don't know. It's hard. I know how much I loved my gun when I was riding. Yeah.
The picture of him with that rifle, do you know when that was taken?
That's a damn good question.
Was it that rifle in the photograph or no?
Yeah, no, it's not, because
It's not
if
the
you
rifle,
look,
okay.
if you look very carefully at it,
Yeah.
it's got a piece of rawhide going up it.
That's-
Hell, I measured from site to breech, hell, I about wore myself out trying to prove it. No, this would have been canned after he came back. Yeah, he was witness coming back down the river, and his complaint was that Indian women just hollered, were too emotional for him. Of course, that's after 10 years of putting up with it. Anything else? I'll let you release you from active duty. Anyway, come on up and take a look at some of this stuff, and somewhere, I thought I had some extra stuff, but anyhow,
Oh, I had one more question.
Yeah, good.
So if Hanson knew that it had that signature inside the,
yeah,
whatever.
I told him, didn't matter.
oh, really?
He said, yeah, well, if geese could fly and all this kind of crap, and I go, what are you talking about, Jim? I'm now that's my problem, but Jim and I have gone around, but I'm irritated because they sit on research empires. And Jim's museum is for research, but he's so adamant about that signature on the barrel. He just can't do it. The Hawken, the lore and legend of the Hawken, in American history, we're missing a whole generation of the most important rifles the first rifles that ever truly went west with the purpose of the ability to take care of big game. They're missing. I think the battle cry now is not Stanton, it's not Hawken. I think I'm challenging that. I think Mr. Beckworth, the discovery of Mr. Beckworth, and that was way after the fact. I had to sell the gun to find out, right? It becomes like I said, a pure case of extreme, a thing of extreme history, documented by a person of extreme history. And I'll write it, and the title is Search for an Early Hawken. I'm not beating my chest, I'll lay it out, and from there on, we'll go from there.